It's been a disappointing season for the Notre Dame men's basketball team, but could the comeback win over Boston College be the turning point? Plus, what does the future hold for Micah Shrewsberry's program after year two? Tom Noie and I are breaking it down on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up? Welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. Happy Friday and happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Today is February 14th, and thanks for kicking off your Friday by making this your first listen of the day. Before we get rolling, please make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or your preferred podcast platform. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It's been a while since we did this, but I am excited to talk some hoops on the show today. I got the chance to catch up with men's basketball beat writer Tom Noie from the South Bend Tribune to do a deep dive into Notre Dame men's basketball on the heels of a much-needed win over Boston College that snapped a three-game losing skid. We'll break down the importance of that win, the team's struggles in close games this season, and how injuries to Marcus Burton and other key players have factored into a disappointing season. We'll also talk about why year two under Micah Shrewsberry has not brought the improvement that many of us had hoped for, what the best-case scenario is for the rest of the season, and how this year has shaped the outlook for the future of the program. Check it out. All right, it's great to have Tom Noie from the South Bend Tribune back on the show to talk about some hoops, and we actually have something good to talk about as Notre Dame snapped a three-game losing streak with a close win over Boston College on Wednesday night, and I don't want to overstate a win over a team who was 2-10 in conference play going into the matchup, but man, did they need that. So how important was that win for this team, not just in the standings, but just given how many close games they have lost this season?
Massive, because when you listen to Micah Shrewsberry and you listen to the players, they've all said to a man and to a coach, we're close, we can do this, we believe we can do this, and they've just been crushed. Like they've had their hearts ripped out, whether it's Virginia Tech or Miami or Florida State or name the Syracuse. Just name the team, name the road trip, and name the opponent that they've come up short against. They just had to win that game. It didn't matter how. It didn't matter how ugly it was. And, man, was it ugly late night in Chestnut Hill. They just had to get back on that charter at 2:40. I think they landed at 4:40 in the morning back in South Bend. Get back on the charter and feel like, you know what? It's not that big of a deal that we beat Boston College because Boston College stinks and they're 2-10, but it's a big deal that they were finally able to clear that hurdle. Now, all that said, we've said all this before about this basketball team, which kind of you're kind of like when they beat Georgia Tech, it was the same situation. Didn't matter how ugly it was, didn't matter that it wasn't pretty, didn't matter that it looked like a rock fight. All that mattered was Notre Dame needed to win a close game, and you thought that was going to get them over the hump, and then they lost three in a row. So what direction does this go after this? I have absolutely no idea with this team.
Yeah, they've got some big tests coming up with Louisville and SMU, but it's weird because this team right now, they're 11-13, but they lost by 1 point in overtime to Rutgers, by one at home to North Carolina and NC State. They lost by 6 to Miami after having a lead in the second half, and they lost by 2 to Virginia Tech. So what has been their biggest issue in these close games?
How much time do we have? You said you're only going to keep me 30 minutes. This might take 3 hours and 30 minutes because honestly, I think it's a little bit of everything. It's a confidence. It's the rotation. I think it's the roster. And at the end of the day, it has to be some coaching with Micah Shrewsberry where he's supposed to be this big genius, this X and O guy, this offensive mastermind, this guy that's going to – and one of the reasons I picked Notre Dame to go 7-13 last year and to go 12-8 this year was I believed that somewhere along the way, Micah Shrewsberry was just going to scheme his way into maybe 2 or 3 league wins where they didn't have any business winning. We haven't seen that because I don't know. I'm still struggling to figure out exactly who Micah Shrewsberry is as a coach. Like we're 34 games I want to say, if I'm going to do some quick math, 34 games into ACC play, either 34 or 33, and I think he's 12-22. So he just hasn't shown enough, and this team hasn't shown enough to where they're gonna run this play correctly, or they're gonna run this set correctly, or they're gonna come out of after a timeout on an out of bounds under a sidelines out of bounds and run this play to where you say, okay, now I see where all this might be going. You just haven't seen any of that yet, and for whatever reason, it's myriad reasons. Marcus Burton gets hurt, so that they get thrown back by that. Sir Muhammad gets hurt, they get thrown back by that. Now Matalako's hurt, so it's always been like an adjustment to where they don't get much practice time. They don't have much time to kind of figure things out. It's got to be done on the fly, and apparently this team just doesn't do it well on the fly.
That's the thing that I've had the most struggle kind of understanding, because when the season started, anyone could look at the roster and say, yeah, there's a talent deficiency, to say the least. But they weren't super active in the transfer portal, and I think that's partially on the coaching staff as well. So it's not just the players. The coaching staff is responsible for getting in good players into the room. I think the thing that has confused me the most is the emphasis on offense going into the season, and then in these close games late, a lot of guys are just standing around, and you see Micah Shrewsberry on the sideline, like running around, sweating, screaming, yelling, and yet nothing's really happening on the court. So where do you think that disconnect comes from? Because it looks like he's coaching his ass off, and yet there's not a whole lot of scheme and stuff happening on the court.
I think that's one of the problems, is he's coaching his ass off. Like, I think he's a little bit too overbearing on this program and too much of a micromanager, to where he's diagramming, he's pointing, he's shouting, he's doing this on every single possession. And I get that, but in practice, because I think in a game, especially in a game of basketball, you coach your ass off and you coach your guys hard during the week. But I think during the games, there's got to be a point where you just let them go, Tyler, and be like basketball is such an instinctive game. Like, you're running up and down the court. And when you run up and down the court, you're looking for the ball, you're looking for the defense, you're looking for the basket. You shouldn't be looking over to the sideline at Micah Shrewsberry at what maybe he may be diagramming or calling or wanting this guy to go here, or you come set the screen here. Like, at some point, it's got to be on the players to be like, Coach, we got this. We know what we're going to run. We get into his tight situation. Maybe that speaks to not having the trust in this roster that he should have. Maybe it's the players just not understanding that at some time we just have to go. Like, we're going to run this, and we're going to get Marcus Burton a shot. You go back to guys standing around. We were sitting there in the press box at Purcell Pavilion watching the end of the Virginia Tech game. And that's another game, up double digits at home against an inferior opponent. You should win. Late in that game, I think from the 3:30 mark or maybe the 2:40 mark, the offensive possessions, we're talking about them upstairs, and it's Marcus Burton ISO, Marcus Burton ISO, Marcus Burton ISO, Tay Davis ISO, Tay Davis ISO, Julian Roper, fake three-pointer drive. Like, what is that offense? What are we doing here? Like, and I get the talent deficiency, but for everybody who says that, well, you know what? Marcus Burton was their best player. They lost their best player. It wasn't so many years ago. Maybe it was. It's not for me because I'm just such an old guy. But do you remember back in 2010? You might not, because you were probably still playing with in the
I mean, I
box.
was 14.
Okay, you're way too young for that. 2010, Notre Dame loses its best player and Luke Herringody late in the season.
Yeah.
And it looks like they're cooked. They're done. They're not going back to the NCAA tournament. Notre Dame all of a sudden says, you know what? This is what's going to work. We're going to go to the burn offense, and we're going to run off 4 wins: Pittsburgh, Georgetown, Marquette, Connecticut. Boom, 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 boom. They go back to the NCAA tournament. I just can't buy the argument that, well, if one guy goes down, then everything goes up in the air and we just have no idea what we're doing. That's up to Micah Shrewsberry as the, quote, offensive guru or the offensive mastermind, whatever else you want to call him, to figure it out and say, we may be missing Marcus Burton, or we may be missing Matalaco, or we can't get Braden Shrewsberry open for a clean 3, but this is what we're going to do instead. And the fact that we haven't seen that is just, it's equally part confusing and questionable as to where this is all going with this basketball program.
Tom will be right back with us in a second to break down how Notre Dame's bad luck with injuries has really plagued this season. But before we do, I want to tell you about Factor. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year, Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's calorie smart, protein plus, or keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. I recently tried their Protein Plus meals, and they were packed with flavor and kept me full throughout the day. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 off and use code LockedOnCollege50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnCollege50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. I'm glad you brought up the injuries because after Notre Dame lost that nail-biter to Rutgers and Marcus Burton gets hurt in that game, on one hand, I'm obviously worried that he's going to miss a significant amount of time because at that point, we didn't know if it was going to be a season-ending injury or if he was just going to be out a couple of weeks. But I was really impressed with how the rest of the team rallied, specifically Matt Alaco. And the way I kind of thought about it was, okay, if Marcus Burton is able to come back from this injury in, let's say, a month, they're going to lose some games, right? Because they had Houston coming up, Creighton. So I was like, okay, it could be rough, but maybe this will be the thing that other guys on the team need, like a Tay Davis or a Braden Shrewsberry, to be a little bit more comfortable running the offense or just getting their shot without Marcus Burton having to do everything. And then that just didn't happen. It just didn't happen at all. Guys did not develop how we had hoped. So I guess how much of this season's struggles can be attributed to the fact that, hey, they lost their best player for a significant amount of time, and not just their best player, but the person who they run everything through on offense. And then, as you mentioned, Sir Muhammad missed some time, and now most recently, Matt Alaco.
The Marcus Burton injury was a crusher. Don't get me wrong. Like, you cannot lose a guy like Marcus Burton and expect this season to be any sort of a success the way you had hoped. So that hurt. But I think the bigger injury in some regards was Sir Muhammad, because you lose Marcus Burton. All right. You lose Marcus Burton, but you had a top 50, top 60 point guard prospect recruit freshman that you could have just plugged in and said, you know what, Marcus Burton's hurt. I think in the grand scheme of things, when they started recruiting, when they had Marcus Burton on the team, and they didn't know what they had, and they didn't know they had the ACC Rookie of the Year on the team last year. When they had Marcus Burton and they had Sir Muhammad, I think in the grand scheme of things, they recruited Sir Muhammad and said, look, you're going to come in and you can be the point guard and you can run this basketball program as a true freshman. That never happened with Sir, because the minute he got here in June, he had a knee issue. And then, well, let's give him rest. That's not going to work. Well, let's have him play through it. That's not going to work. Then they had to shut him down for 10 games and have surgery. So I think that was the bigger injury, to where they put so much stock in Marcus Burton. Okay, he's not here. Well, maybe let's go with Sir Muhammad. Well, he's not here either. All right, so what do you do about a handler? Who's going to be the main handler? Can Tay Davis play that role? Can Matt Alaco play that role? What are we going to do with Logan Imes? And I just think the Burton injury and the Muhammad injury as a 1-2 punch just set this program back so far, and especially in when it happened. Like, if it happened January or late January, where you see there's more of a rhythm to the schedule, you get a bye thrown in there, you get some practice time. But when it's early November, or it's late November, early December, games are just coming at you left and right. You have no time to practice. You have no time to adjust. You just have to roll those guys out there. Like, to have this program go from playing Creighton, and they played well against Creighton in that last game against Las Vegas, but to play Creighton that game and then all of a sudden fly all the way across the country back home and get back on the plane and go to Georgia. Like Micah Shrewsberry said then, that was like an NBA loss type of regular season game, to where you look at the schedule during the season and you're like, that Georgia game's an automatic loss because of the quick turnaround time and no practice time. And then you throw the fact that you lose your best player. They just had absolutely no shot early, and it's been a struggle ever since to kind of get back up to speed, which is what made the Georgia Tech game so puzzling and frustrating, because you're like, all right, now Burton's back. He's healthy. Sir Muhammad's back. He's relatively healthy. All the pieces are starting to fit. They just beat Georgia Tech. They're going on the road, and they're going to beat Miami, and they're going to beat Florida State, and they're going to come home against Georgia or Virginia Tech and win that one. Instead of 4-6, Tyler, you were looking at a team that could have been 10-2 and should have been 10-2.
Yeah, and that's a great point about the schedule and how it kind of shook out for them timing-wise. Like, the beginning of the year was rough. Like you said, they lose Marcus Burton. That's a crusher. But I thought that the player development for all the other guys would be a little bit more improved, especially when, Jalen Harrelson commits to Notre Dame. And the number one reason why is because of Micah Shrewsberry's ability to develop players. And you look at the guys on the roster, and I think Marcus Burton has certainly improved, but I can't say the same about everyone else. But is there one player that stands out and their lack of player development has especially surprised you?
I'm going to stun you with this answer. You may need to brace yourself, because you may just literally fall. You may literally fall on the floor. You know who the one player that stuns me as far as his lack of player development, lack of consistent minutes, lack of any minutes?
Well, I have one in mind, but now that you said lack of minutes, I think you gave it away.
I'm going with Burke Chebahar.
Oh, okay. No, I was way off.
See? Fall on the floor.
Okay.
I'll give you a few minutes to collect yourself. And you're like, and the listeners are going to be like, what the hell is Noie talking about, Burke Chebahar? The guy went to Lehigh. He's basically the 13th scholarship guy. He's the last scholarship guy on the roster. There was not a time in late spring or early summer when Burke got here. It was early summer. Then it was late summer. Then it was fall. I think we talked to Micah Shrewsberry 3 or 4 times during that period, and unprompted, because everybody's asking about Marcus Burton. They're asking about Tate Davis. They're asking about Braden Shrewsberry. They're asking about Matt Olako, who was touted as the greatest one-year addition that this Notre Dame men's basketball program has ever had. That's what Matt Olako is supposed to be. So they're asking about Keba. Unprompted. Nobody had Burke Chebahar on their radar. And Micah Shrewsberry, by himself, would say, you know what? Burke Chebahar is doing this. Burke Chebahar is doing that. Burke Chebahar is a very interesting guy. We can facilitate a lot of offense through, and he's a very intriguing guy because he makes us flow better. We're better when he's in the lineup. And so you're thinking, maybe this guy, maybe Notre Dame and the staff saw something in Burke Chebahar that nobody else saw. And he could be a guy that could just come out and maybe not nationally, but maybe within the ACC, coaches and media and other players would look at Burke Chebahar and be like, where the hell did this guy come from? Like, really? Lehigh? He played at Lehigh? But that said, Burke Chebahar has played in 11 games. He's averaging 7 minutes a game. He's shooting 60% from the field and 56.3 from three. He's averaging 3.2 points and 1.2 rebounds and collecting DNP CDs like they're Halloween candy. So it's like Micah talked this guy up in the preseason and early in the season, and then all of a sudden the season gets here and he's banished to the end of the bench. So I would go with Burke Chebahar. I could also go with J.R. Knesny. I can go with Nikita Konstantinovsky. Like the older guys. We talked about Marcus Burton and the injury and what happened after he went out. Well, Tate Davis had to do more. Guess what? Tate Davis did more. Braden Shrewsberry had to do more. Guess what? He did more. Matt Olako had to do more. Guess what? He did more. But then the other guys, Keba and Sir and Garrett and Logan Imes and maybe Julian Roper, Cole Serta, those 3 players that I mentioned all raised their games when Marcus Burton went out. But the rest of the roster was just was just kind of there. And I think that really hamstrung what this team was able to do and what they weren't able to do as they tried to weather the storm when Marcus was gone.
Okay, so for me, it's Kebajai. And then when you said lack of minutes, I thought you were going to say J.R. Knesny because he's only averaging 13 minutes a game. Not only that, I think his relative is tweeting at you too about his lack of minutes and going back to his production. So what's going on with that situation? Because I think a lot of people are wondering what he did that basically removed him from the lineup.
No, absolutely no idea. And I pressed Micah on this on the ACC call this week. Like, and it's not a situation. I love Micah's quote. I don't know if you were able to listen to the his post game radio show last week. I have it here somewhere but not last week, last night, where he said something of, he told his guys, the world is trying to tear us apart. They want us to point fingers. They want us to blame each other. They want us to separate. And I think a lot of that goes back to the question that I had about J.R. Knesny in the ACC call, where it wasn't like, why aren't you playing JR? I'm like, look, what does J.R. Knesny have to do to get more of a role in the rotation? And this was 2 days after the Virginia Tech game where J.R. Knesny came in the first half and played 120 seconds. And then he checked in early in the second half and played 60 seconds. And this was for a team that scored 63 points against one of the worst teams in the league in Virginia Tech. So you're just thinking, look, you've got a guy in JR who's was a proven scorer at St. Joe. I watched him and I covered him all throughout high school because St. Joe's right down the street from Notre Dame. And he was a guy that averaged 29 a game. So I'm not saying that JR would be able to go and score 29 a game at Notre Dame, but somewhere along the line, he could help, right? Like, right, Micah, can he help? He was very vague on it, saying there are more things that go into playing time than just being in the game. Like, practice is a big thing for me. And my follow-up question was, does that mean he's not doing enough in practice? Is he not showing you enough in practice for you to trust him in the game? And Micah wasn't like, you can just tell, like, I don't know Micah Shrewsberry that well, but I think I can read his body language and I can read the way he reacts to certain questions on whether or not he wants to address that. And he just repeated, he said, a lot of things go into it. And the thing with JR too is it seemed like last week for the Florida State and Virginia Tech swing, for whatever reason, and again, I can't get a straight answer from anybody over there. It just seems like that stretch at Florida State against Virginia Tech, somebody somewhere along the line in the coaching staff decided, let's look at Cole Serta and let's look at Garrett Sundra, which led me to my third question of Micah in the ACC Coaches Conference teleconference, and said, I said, what went into the decision of taking longer looks at Sundra and Serta when they basically haven't played all year? Like, Sundra's played averaging 10 minutes a game, but he's also had 12 DNP CDs, and Cole Serta hadn't seen the floor up until recently since he committed that foul against Rutgers. So I ask about Sundra and I ask about Serta, and Micah Shrewsberry's answer is, well, they're in the game more because they provide shooting. And I wanted to, like, I'm on camera with him on the ACC coaches call, so I can't react, but I wanted to be like, isn't that what J.R. Knesny can offer you? Like, I get it with Serta and Sundra being young guys, being his guys, which I believe is a major part of it. But you've got a veteran in there who's been in this program for 4 years, as opposed to freshmen who are still trying to figure out what this whole college basketball thing is all about. So I went with Burke Shebahar, but I could very well go with J.R. Knesny as well, as a guy that you're like, what is going on with this development, with this rotation, with everything?
It doesn't make any sense to me. And if it's a thing with practice, it's like, okay, but we have a full season's worth last year where he was averaging 22 minutes a game. And I'm not saying he was like, JJ Redick out there, but he was a good offensive player and provided you something as a shooter. So that really hasn't made a whole lot of sense to me. I think there have been times this year where I would look at the rotations and think, like, what is going on? And maybe it goes back to your point earlier where Shrewsberry is coaching so hard on a possession-by-possession basis that some things take a back seat, like rotations, and then the game ends, and you're like, wait a second, why did J.R. Knesny only play 5 minutes?
Here, I got another story for you. It's story time today. Story time with Tyler. Micah was talking earlier, I think maybe in November, early December with us about rotations. And he shared a story. He shared an anecdote about Joe Mazzulla, the Celtics head coach. And he said, there are times in games, there are times before games where Joe Mazzulla will go to a guy maybe deeper into the rotation and say, hey, look, Tyler, I don't think I'm going to be able to get to you tonight. So I don't know if I'm going to get to you, but just stay ready. You're probably not going to play. So we turned the recorders off and the cameras went off and everything. And I asked Micah, I said, just curious, do you do that at any time with guys? Like, do you go into a game against this opponent or that opponent and go to a Logan Imes or go to a J.R. Knesny or a Burke Chebahar and say, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to you tonight, but you know what? Just stay ready. And Micah said, I go into every games and I go into every game and really don't have any idea what the rotation might call for in that game. So he's like, my head's going like a million different directions as far as rotations. And I can see that now because some of these rotations that we've seen the last 10 days, Tyler, we're shaking our heads in the press box. We're like, look at this team on the floor. Like I wrote a couple down. I think one lineup was Marcus Burton, Logan Imes, Nikita, Roper, and Garrett Sundra. Like where other than Marcus Burton are you getting offense from that group?
Tom and I still have more to get to, including the best case scenario for the Irish as they finish out the regular season. But first, a word from our friends at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there is no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's a great story because I think it provides some much needed context to the situation. And one of my friends suggested in a group chat that Micah needs to hire like an analytics guy where he just has to call Micah Shrewsberry out in his rotations and say, can't be doing this. Can't be doing this. And that's his only job, is to only focus on who is in at any single moment. But I do want to wrap things up here on a somewhat positive note because they do have several games left in the ACC, and it's not going to be super easy because they got to host Louisville and SMU, who's been really good this year. Road game at Clemson coming up here. But what's the best case scenario for Notre Dame for the rest of the regular season? Like, is there any path to a strong finish in ACC play?
I'd say win all your home games, and then you go and just wing it in that last road swing that they have at Wake, actually the Clemson, at Clemson, and then at Wake at the end of the month, and maybe get one of those games. Like, if Florida State can go into Winston-Salem and beat Wake Forest the way they beat them last night, why can't Notre Dame do something like that? Like, I'm supposed to, in one of my assignments as far as advancing every game, I'm supposed to make a prediction, and I've already turned in my Louisville copy for Sunday, and my prediction on it was Notre Dame 76, Louisville 72, and I'm like, I know I shouldn't be going down this road before because I've been down it as to here we go again with this team, but at some point you look at this and say, shouldn't shouldn't they go and win a game like they're going to have to play on Sunday? Like Louisville may come in here and it may be like a 24-point game with 15 minutes to play in the second half, the way Louisville's playing.
Yeah, they're really.
But
really
at some point, Notre Dame's just got to turn that corner and be like, you know what? We're better than what we've shown. We believe in ourselves, and let's start raising the bar of what this program can be. But that said, it's going to be really tough because I don't know if you saw last night when every time they put the league standings up on ESPNU, they would put the league standings up and they would highlight where BC was and highlight where Notre Dame was. And then they would also mention that Notre Dame has the toughest remaining schedule of any team in the ACC. They will play, of their last 7 games, 5 of those last 7 games are against teams that have winning or 500 records in the league. And Notre Dame has only played teams like that twice. Duke on January 11th was the last time that Notre Dame played a league game against someone who had a winning record. Now it's going to be against teams that almost all have winning records. You throw Pitt in there, and you throw, I forget who off the top of my head, the other team that does not have a Cal. Cal and Pitt are the last 2 teams that do not have winning records that Notre Dame is going to face. Other than that, it was something where that's great that you were able to relatively survive most of January and early February with so many road games, and now you get so many home games to finish. But look at that schedule, and it's just something where, all right, now it's time to put up or shut up with this program and really start building some momentum, not only for the ACC tournament and whatever postseason may or may not happen, but for next season and to build on something positive. Because I'm telling you, that 3-game losing streak, that Syracuse loss where they were up 17, that really lit the fan base as to what the hell is going on with Notre Dame basketball and where is it going? And you know what? For me, I'm in 27th year covering this program. I'm starting to wonder too. Not saying that Micah Shrewsberry is not the guy, but we needed to see some progress. And right now, 5-8 is not progress given what they did last season at 7-13.
You led me right to it. A big picture question on the way out, because on one hand, the season has definitely been a disappointment. I think it's fair to say that the honeymoon period for Micah Shrewsberry ended a while ago, but you look at the future, the recruiting class that they're bringing in, it does seem like there is still some momentum. But when you look at what's happened this season and how it's unfolded, how much does it change your perception of the long-term future of the program under Micah Shrewsberry?
It's going to be really hard next year, and to be like, let's say they're 5-8 right now. Let's say the season goes, best case scenario, they go 9-11. So they do show a little bit of improvement off of last year, but it's going to be really difficult for a program like Notre Dame that can't just go to the portal and say, we're going to take this guy, we're going to take this guy, and we're going to get this recruiting class in, and we're going to automatically be better next season. To hang everything on this recruiting class, all right? And that's the one hope that people have is, well, wait till next year. Next year is going to be better. Next year when they get the recruits in, and then it's going to be the third year. And when they get that recruiting class in, that's going to be when Notre Dame is going to be an NCAA tournament team. And I say one word to those people that bank everything on next year: Rutgers. Everybody talked about Rutgers. They've got these 2 NBA guys. They've got Dylan Harper, and they've got 2 lottery picks. They're gonna not only are they gonna win the Big Ten, they're gonna make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. And Rutgers basketball, they may go to the Final Four for the first time since 1974. I don't think Rutgers is even going to make the NCAA tournament. So don't be. I would say pump the brakes on saying next year is going to be better and next year is going to be different and next year is going to be so much more interesting because they have a recruiting class, a good recruiting class coming in. It takes a lot more, and it takes growth, and it takes guys that want to return. Like, we haven't even talked about what that roster might look like, because I'm telling you, people are going to wonder, Is Marcus Burton coming back? Is Tay Davis coming back? Is so-and-so coming back? You have to go under the assumption in this day and age of college basketball, if you're a college basketball general manager or you're a head coach or an associate coach or whoever, you have to go under the assumption that nobody's coming back because anybody can leave and nobody would begrudge them. Like if Marcus Burton decides, you know what, I think I've done a lot of things on the basketball court. I want to take care of my family. I'm jumping for the best NIL offer. Who's going to argue that? Because that's what this sport has become, where it's a year-to-year proposition, and you better max out every single year because you have absolutely no idea what the next year is going to bring for your program.
Yeah, Notre Dame invested a lot into Micah Shrewsberry, and now he is going to invest heavily in his roster next year because I think people have been giving him a pass for the first 2 seasons. Next season, with all the talent coming in, the fact that it's year 3, it might not be like year 3 for the football head coach, but it's going to be a very pivotal year for Micah Shrewsberry. But that's a great place to wrap it up, Tom. You know, I always appreciate the time. It was great catching up with you, and we'll do it again soon because college basketball is taking center stage now. And hopefully this team can give us a little run in the ACC tournament so we can kind of look ahead to next year with some positive momentum.
Let's go. I'm tired of writing about bad losses. I'm tired of writing about near misses. I'm tired about writing about this team trying to reach its potential. Let's take a few more steps these last 7 games of the regular season.
That's a wrap for this episode, and that'll do it for this week on Locked On Irish. I'm going to be right back here on Monday with part 3 of our deep dive into the quarterback battle. I'm going to make the case for the freshman phenom CJ Carr to start. Then we're going to flip it around to the reasons why he shouldn't start, and then we'll wrap it up with my take on the better of the 2 arguments and whether or not I think he's going to win the job. You can catch parts 1 and 2 of the series on the channel if you missed them earlier this week. Part 1 is focused on Steve Angeli, and part 2 is about Kenny Minchey. Plenty of great stuff coming your way all off-season long, so make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. And if you enjoyed the show today, please give this video a like if you're watching along on YouTube, or rate the show 5 stars and leave a review on your preferred podcast platform. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you next week.